And I believe we are 100% live. I want to welcome everybody here. This is the Scabby Rooster LARP Tavern, and we are really excited about everything that has been happening this weekend at Gen Con 2020. We haven't had a full Gen Con experience. No one has. We've not been in Indianapolis. We've not been crowded in the hallways, fighting past vendor booths. But what we have been doing is playing games digitally using the technology that's available to us to recreate that environment. And I've got to say, personally at least, I do feel the sense that a Gen Con has happened. It's been very different, but we have had the opportunity to kind of gather together and celebrate the things that we are all very passionate about. I am surrounded at this table by some of the most talented individuals in the LARP and immersive storytelling world, and I'm excited to share a conversation with them. So if this is your first time here, thank you for joining us. Please consider dropping a follow. We really appreciate it. We're building slowly, but we're trying to bring more conversations like this into the world. So if you like what you see here, be sure to let everyone know, share, retweet, that whole thing. You can find us across all the social media and everything below in the panels. I want to thank our mods, first and foremost, for spending their time with us and for helping us to guide you. So if you have questions while this conversation is going, be sure to put them into the chat. We will get around to them. They are collecting them now. So this conversation is specifically about how LARP and immersive storytelling can evolve in this day and age, as we are now looking at more and new ways to engage in the hobbies and the things that we love. Now, some of this isn't new to everyone, though. We've been doing a number of these. Lots of us use virtual tabletops. Some of us have been involved in the VR scene for a very long time. There is a lot to talk about today. So I don't really want to delay, but what I do want to do is make sure that every single person here is introduced and gets to say hello to you. So I'm going to start over here. Azrai, you're joining us. Say hello to everybody and tell people a little bit about yourself and what your experience is.
Hello, everybody. My name is Azrai. I have been a content creator for about 5 years. I've been involved in the LARP world for a little bit longer, and I have been studying concept art, just art in general, but specifically for immersive experiences like a little bit of theme park design, a little bit of video games and movie concept design for about 10 years in total. Um, well, that's what I've been doing. I create content across multiple platforms now,
And we're
focused on.
we're gonna go through where everybody can find you, but do you want to tell people a little bit about your where they can find you directly at this time, or do you want to wait?
I mean, I'm on TikTok as the Azrai and YouTube as Azrai. That's where I put most of the content related to this stuff.
Excellent. So check out the Azrai. We
Mhm.
have Ryan Omega over here on the other side of me. Ryan, say hi to everybody and tell people a little bit about what you do.
Hey, I'm Ryan Omega. I am creator, podcast, and live stream host and producer. Also a director, game designer, game player on various shows. I'm responsible for creating the show Blank Slate, which you find on Scabby Rooster, which is an original black box LARP show. I'm also one of the narrative designers for Reality RP, which was on the official Dungeons and Dragons live event D&D Live 2020, which was a mixture of character interaction, a reality elimination type show, and based off of using actual canon D&D characters that I was able to help cast and help direct for a live performance for 3 days.
Excellent.
And I am the host of Live Action Roleplay, a podcast has been going on for a few years, and the host of the same Twitch channel, Live Action Roleplay.
Excellent. And we are really thankful that you're with us and excited to see your face again. Thanks for joining us, Ryan.
Thank you.
Sam, Inns, did you have anything that you wish to tell people about what you do, what your experience is, where you get the cats that just appear in your arms?
Well, there's quite a few cats in this house, so you'll probably see some of them move from my screen to Faye's and vice versa. However, this is mine. She's mean and terrible.
Okay, we'll get the
Oh,
terrible
ow.
cat. What about you?
You could tell from her full
She's mean
name.
and terrible. And she likes to chew cables. That being said, hi, I'm Sam. I have done quite a few things. I actually got my start in online text roleplay, even before I did LARP at all. And then I found LARP, dislocated a knee, and then decided that I should definitely continue LARPing. And it kind of just all followed that. I don't really know what else to say.
That's enough. You're amazing.
Cool.
Thank you for joining us. Next to Sam, we have Jonaya Kemper, who is a very welcome face here. Naya, do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and why you're so wonderful?
Oh, I thought you were going to ask me to tell the story of how you convinced me to go to a LARP, but we will tell that story one day.
We can tell that story one day.
Yes. Hi, my name is Jonaya Kemper. I am a game designer across a few genres, in both tabletop and LARP and video games. In addition to that, I'm also a games academic. If you've heard the term emancipatory bleed, that is because that was my thesis from New York University Gallatin.
Yeah.
It's great. I love LARP and role playing in general. In addition to academia and keeping up and trying to like have my hand on both tabletops and LARPs, some of the things I've done are large international LARPs, as well as kind of diving headfirst into Nordic LARPs as well as American freeform LARPs, and writing and producing and all this other fun stuff with that.
So you're saying you're busy?
Maybe.
Excellent. Thank you for
but I'm
finding
doing
the
the
time
thing I
for
love
us.
right.
Yeah, of course.
That sounds so. Of course, I have time. This is what I love doing.
I know. So next to Naya, we have Haven Kendrick. Haven, why don't you tell everybody
Hello.
who you are and a little bit about what you do?
Right. Lots of things again, the whole being busy thing.
Yeah.
I've been broadcasting on Twitch for, I'd say, about 3 years now. Yeah, about 3 years. Started in 2017. So I've been doing that for a long time. I also do voice work and sound design as well on the side. And in regards to roleplay, it's always been something I've been interested in and dabbled in a lot in the past. But I didn't pick it up very seriously until around summer last year. That's when I got invested in VR chat roleplay, which has been an absolutely insane experience. So it'll be fun to talk about that.
Yeah, we're really excited. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, all of these pieces have been gathered together very carefully, and I'm excited to see what we all have to say on these varied topics. However, we also have Fei with us. Fei, hi. You look lovely.
Hi.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what your experience is and what it is that you do?
Which 25, which year in the 25 years?
Well,
so
we don't
basically
talk about 2020, but you can talk about any other year.
Well, I've been doing tabletops and RPGs and, of course, LARPs for about 27 years now. A while.
We'll say a while.
I actually started with way back in the day when the internet was young and wackier with IRC chat, and I actually moved into TTRPGs from there, and then from there into LARP, and then back into tabletops, and then into forum role playing. It's I think I actually am responsible for making a network that is, I think, still active. I handed it off to someone else for forum role players for Legends of the Five Rings. So it's a lot. In the past 10 years, I've mostly been working in logistics and storytelling for various LARPs. People borrow me for NPC, and also for making things. I guess I'm the easy button behind the scenes. I don't know. But that's what I do.
You
in a
definitely
nutshell.
make LARPs easier. I will attest to that. Okay, well, that's everybody in our panel. Now, if you are with us currently, thank you again for joining us. If you have questions for any of these individuals regarding their experience or their time within interactive storytelling or LARP, please don't hesitate. We have moderators, and Fabian is doing an amazing job right now of collecting all of the questions that you may have so that we can make sure to answer any of them and all of them right here within this forum. So thank you again for joining me. I'm going to start this out by first saying that we have a couple of different topics, and I'm going to just broach on a little bit of it. But the first thing that I want to talk about is what is currently in your world happening and with the interactivity that you are doing as an artist and a creator in the digital space. What is it that you are immediately involved in? Let's go back up here to Azrai and see what they have to say. Az, do you have something that you've been working with?
I've been working mostly on TikTok lately. It's short form content, so it's pretty easy and manageable. But it also, that platform, coincidentally, I downloaded it on a whim and found that it lends itself incredibly well to interactive storytelling. Everything from like the short form, it lets you kind of, nobody gets to monologue at each other really. There's a minute limit, but there's also the duet feature, which allows people to interact with each other's work and sometimes like genuinely influence or change the nature of the original video. So that allowed for people to start creating original characters and creating their own storylines where they could interact with each other and collaborate across long distances. And so I've been taking those features and trying to give interactive storytelling a structure that sort of fits the format so that people can role play and game together with actual like built worlds and a sort of loose set of rules. I mean, by rules I really just mean consent-based mechanics. So that's what I've been working on. And the big tag that I've been focusing on is called A Sunderland. It's a like a post-apocalyptic story, but we decided to tell the story of the actual apocalyptic event first. And because the world got very intense, we did the apocalypse and we're kind of pausing it now and like pacing it out. But we're gearing up to bring it back. And I think that's been pretty successful in terms of people being very interested in it and kind of LARPing without realizing that they're LARPing a lot of the time.
That's what's interesting to me, is that I think that there is a growing trend with TikTok that this is happening quite often. Some people embrace it as a form of storytelling and LARPing, and some people think that they're just TikToking. And the idea of OCs and creating characters and bringing it into an immersive shared story, right? It immediately elevates it, and I think that there are some strange perceptions around it. We also have a looming threat of the removal of TikTok. How do you feel about the idea of this form specifically not being understood and then potentially being removed from our society?
Well, as far as the removal of it, I'm not sure. I'm never sure if that's going to happen, and if it is, I'm never sure it's for the reasons that people say it's for. There are some speculations as to the security of the app, but nothing that I have found has really confirmed that or like denied it specifically. But from what I can tell, it's not. I haven't seen anything that tells me it's more dangerous than like Facebook.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know what grounds there would be to ban it at this time. I'm not. We'll see what happens. But there are other apps that pretty much have just taken the TikTok formula and brought it to another place. So we'll see. I think that this format, this sort of short form video, I think something will come up to replace it, because TikTok, I don't know about 2020, but it was the fastest growing social media app of 2019, and I don't think something like that can disappear without something coming to fill that void.
Have you used any of the alternatives?
I have. There's one it's spelled like the word like. That's the closest one to the functionality of TikTok. It's the one that I like best so far, but I don't know much else about it. There aren't a whole lot of people on it there yet, but I imagine that would be the one that would that would serve to fill the TikTok void best if TikTok did get banned.
Yeah. So I fully hear you. I have we're gonna come back to this, but I do want to go around the circle real quick, and each of you is going to have a moment. We're gonna find out more about your specific specialties. Do any of you also use TikTok? Do any of you role play on the TikTok app? Okay, that's it. I've done a little bit, and I actually am deeply working on an OC for Sunderland, actually. But there are a lot of barriers to individuals, I think, who maybe aren't familiar with it, who are either from an older generation or when they've gotten onto it, they have security concerns. What would you say to those individuals as that would help them to understand it a little bit better and maybe engage with it?
Well, as far as people feeling that they're maybe not part of the generation that uses it, there is a type of creator on TikTok that's quite popular. It's sort of similar to YouTube, how YouTube pushes people like Jake Paul and things like that. But there are a lot of much smaller communities of people that are far more diverse and varied. There are people of, I mean, all types of people are on TikTok. It's a matter of finding those little communities, and you will find a place where you find people that you sort of vibe with. So that's not it. Yeah, it's just a matter of finding them.
It's really granular, and if you actually open up the doorway, you find that there are just as many slots of communities, right? And it's whatever you're looking for, you can kind of find a niche for it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So though they like to push a lot of dancing videos, and there's nothing wrong with dancing videos, but it's everybody's thing. That's far from the scope of what is on TikTok and the communities that are on there.
Well, I mean, it's like YouTube. If you look at YouTube, you would think that all that was on YouTube, if you just took the cursory glance at it, was, you know, cats and dogs and, you know, silly jokes. But when you look into it, you find that there are all these other communities attached to it.
Yeah.
So it's very much like any other social media, is what you're saying.
Yes. I'm sorry. There was another part to that question. Sometimes I can only hear one thing at a time.
No, that's okay. I was gonna ask, like, if you have not joined in with TikTok, what would you recommend people do to create an OC and get involved?
I would recommend that they just follow other people for a while and watch their stories. Just sort of gather information, you know. That seems to be like it's pretty easy to find a hook once you watch other people's content. That's exactly what I did. They had a mafia OC trend for a while, which, I mean, most people seem to just join for the 1950s and 40s and 30s aesthetic. So that was, once I found the people who were actually creating stories and not just doing aesthetic videos, not that there's anything wrong with that, it was pretty easy to make videos that they would also want to interact with once you kind of get the feel for them. And it just takes some time. I just watched videos on TikTok for like maybe a whole month before I thought about what I was going to make.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I think it's amazing the depth of story that you can get out of those short form moments. Make you think about storytelling in a different way, because you have to be very succinct. You have to be able to communicate, and there's this riff that starts happening. You know, like in jazz, where one note leads to something else, and you're passing something off to another person, and then they carry it.
It forces people to not be able to take too much control of a story, really, because you only have 60 seconds at most. So you learn the art of simple storytelling, which actually takes quite a lot of effort and thought to tell a story clearly and simply. But then also it forces you to only tell a story in little moments that involve other people. So it really is quite a collaborative experience.
Well, thanks for that. We're going to come back around. I have some questions for you about theme park and some other things, but I want to move over to some of our other guests. Let's move down. Sam, do you have experience with text-based roleplay? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, if I can find my unmute button, apparently. That's helpful. So I actually started on the worst the internet has to offer for text-based roleplay, such as DeviantArt and Tumblr. It is not made for either of those things. I don't know if anyone knows what Tumblr's made for anymore.
Look, at least it wasn't Neopets, okay?
I started
I
on an
blocked that
AOL
out.
chat room.
Yeah, but at least everyone was on AOL chat rooms for text-based roleplay. It
And
feels
that
like
was the worst.
no, that's fair. I've heard about it. I was not on AOL, but man, did I hear about it. I also, so I went around the internet a lot looking for various platforms that would work for what I wanted. I even tried Omegle, which is really a roulette system of pairing you up with someone. And that was definitely interesting to navigate. And then there's also specialty forums and things like that online for various things. Roleplaygateway.com, I think it's .com. I haven't been there in a real long time. Is like individual forums where you could make your own roleplay, you could make your own kind of LARP sort of experience, whatever you wanted, and people could send in characters, they could get it approved and start roleplay. I found very quickly that a lot of the people who ran this don't really know how to run a game in that kind of area. Most people just know how to do the one-on-one roleplay. So when I came into LARP, it was really an eye-opener to see that many people cooperatively collaborating on the same story. I find it personally a little bit difficult to do the online thing again for LARP because it does require so many people. Mm-hmm. It's really difficult in my opinion, and it's just hurdles that I don't know if we've figured out a great way to like mimic that feel yet.
What do you mean by feel, just for those who may not have experienced a in-person LARP before? Because just as we're talking about digital like integration, I feel that there are a lot of role players that have never existed in a physical space as a character in a traditional LARP, you know? And I still feel like those are valid forms of LARP, but we're getting at the point where they're blending. And I think part of my point was that there's an integration that's happening from both directions. So what would you say to those individuals who don't understand LARP? What do you mean by feel?
Well, it's a very specific feel that I personally think kind of comes around every time you get large groups of humans who are all there for the same purpose. It's the same sort of feel that you would get at a concert where everyone is there to see a band that they like and are there to enjoy the experience. It's the same sort of feel that you get I would say even from going to like religious services, if you are someone who believes in what you are going to go participate in, it's the sense of community and communion with people who are like-minded and who are there for the same purpose. Ultimately, it's a sense of community. I would say no matter how short-lived it ends up being for whatever reason that you're there. But LARP specifically is there to get everyone from point A to point B in a certain number of hours. Whether that is a large difference between point A or point B, it doesn't necessarily matter in my opinion. Everyone is working actively towards the same goal, or I suppose working passively depending on what kind of characters people are playing and what kind of game they're there for. But yeah, it's just a very specific feel that I find difficult to explain past that. It's one of those things that I think you need to experience in one way, shape, or form to be able to apply to other things.
I think you've done it, though. I think that makes sense. So when it comes to text-based roleplay, what has changed from the earlier days when you were involved to now?
things are very good at I don't really want to say self-policing, but creating their own kind of unspoken rules. I think that now, depending on what kind of place you would try to break into, there's a lot more unspoken rules in a lot of places because text-based roleplay has been around for so long. That there's a little bit less fumbling in general trying to figure out where things go and how things should be said. And one of the big things is almost every online forum or everything that you go to that has rules written out inevitably will have the rule in like the first 5 of no god modding, which is kind of like what Azrai was talking about with the consent-based rules. Is you cannot take someone else's character and force them to interact with yours. You can't force them to take punches. You can't force them to do anything. You have to leave it open for them to interact with. So,
does everybody then create the environmental factors as a shared group? So I might say
yes.
that the sky is cloudy and stormy, and then you would, like an improvisational actor, take that and add onto it.
Yeah, it's very yes and, for sure. There is a lot of I have just saying fight for example. The first person would do something like, here is the scene that I am thinking of setting. These are the things that I have thought of, and now we're squaring up for a fight. And the second person can then decide, well, I'm going to be aggressive, or I'm going to find somewhere to try and hide in this scenario that you've set up. Or they can do a myriad of other things, and the first person can go back and react then to what is being said. It's a very specific style of writing that takes a while to get used to, especially if you're doing longer style writing instead of just like a couple of lines back and forth, which makes it very quick and easier not to like god mod or contradict yourself. But the longer style for a more back and forth narrative, it's a difficult style of writing to learn because you can only ever control one person at once. And it's very limited omniscience point of view sort of thing.
And again,
you have to leave a lot of things open.
And these are all individual experiences. I think I should probably preface all this. We all have had experienced things differently, so somebody else's text-based experience is not going to be the same as yours. Inns might have experienced something different than from what he would or she would. Like this all could have been very different, right? So everybody experiences things differently. I know there's some other experience here with text-based roleplay, so I'm going to go around and we're going to talk about that. But real quickly, I want to jump over here to Ryan Omega. Ryan, you have recently worked with a lot of larger tabletop RPG groups that have done a lot of streaming content and incorporated elements from the Dungeons and Dragons crowd, but also from other games. And you've done, with us here at the Rooster, you've done a number of experiments with black box LARPing in a Twitch space. And, I mean, you've been all over the map. What would you say is the current momentum and kind of where you are focused in this world, and what do you see coming?
Okay, so let's so I guess I want to start with my most recent efforts, and the biggest one being reality RP for Dungeons and Dragons, which was for D&D Live 2020. So for people who are not familiar with D&D Live, it is an event that is held basically once a year, and it's usually to do an overall promotion of the next storyline that is happening in Dungeons and Dragons. And it's usually associated with many live stream actual plays, as well as it's usually a physical event. So when I was originally hired to help with the development of D&D Live, I was supposed to actually help develop a physical LARP for this year. However, when March came around, that all changed because of lockdowns, and it made it impossible for us to be able to visited the physical space where we were going to have this event. About like a month later, they came to all of the game designers that were part of that original planning process. That included people like Dave Harmon from Australia, Minguette from England, Sharang Biswas from Manhattan, and Elisa Tate, the famed puzzle designer. And they asked us if it was possible to continue to make an interactive event. And we came up with just silly ideas, and we kind of thought, what if we just made something that was like reality cheesy TV, because this is kind of what we need right now. Everyone's under lockdown, no one's feeling good, everyone's scared. And we ended up creating this huge amalgamation of different ways to interact with this world. So for the person who was playing, or for the person who was the audience, they were able to interact with playing different twine games, looking through maps, interacting with certain people. And at the same time, there was a who did it element or a mole or a werewolf mafia element of 10 different champions from 10 different towns of 10 towns, and which one of them was the cultist. And that meant trying to integrate those people being able to role play in their own world on Instagram, having a live television reality elimination competition, as well as having that all mixed in with what the players find, or what the audience finds in these adventures, and being able to figure out or suss which of these 10 different people did it. It was hugely ambitious to make everything that level of interactive. It took hundreds of hours, a lot of tech working out, a lot of just game design, trying to get everything to happen. And my job was also to be the director and the character trainer of how do I get these 10 actors to be able to convey all of these things. And also, this is the background that all of these game writers are also writing, and making sure that that interaction was satisfactory to anyone who was interacting with that world. And it was considered within Dungeons and Dragons' eyes like a successful event, and I was very happy about that. But man,
it's not what you traditionally think when you think Dungeons and Dragons. You all created something that was maybe unexpected with incorporating it in that way. I don't know. It's a larger company, so it's a little harder to, I'm sure, navigate some of the choices that a smaller group might be able to make. I know you have a lot of approval processes and things like that. Working with individuals of that scale, do you feel like those players had an opportunity to engage as fully as you wanted, or was there something missing in the process?
We were very, very lucky that we were given a lot of free reign for those characters, including how I casted those characters. One of the very first things I said is I want a group that is very diverse. In fact, during the casting process, there was a point where I was like, oh my God, I actually need a white cis male. Oh, wait. Let me cast one. Okay, now that I casted one, I can cast everyone else. And it also, I wanted to also make sure that the performers were able to feel like they were able to own their characters. And that took just a little bit of them being able to take some 300 pages of source book, that many of us had to just like make something that was very digestible, and then telling them, okay, you now own this character. How do you feel about being locked up in a tower? How do you feel about this other person? How do you feel about you're about to starve? and allowing them to take on that persona and being able to do as they need. And then we just give them little notes to adjust if we feel like we needed certain things to happen. Because overall, this is a performance for everyone and for the public. And so there were certain things that just needed to be established. So I had to establish certain things like we're not going to cover like sexual assault. Right. We're not going to cover, like we're going to set some hard guidelines. But one of the biggest hard guidelines that I set for Dungeons and Dragons is if your character traditionally hated orcs, that is not going to be a thing in this game. That was one of the things that I wanted to hard establish with a lot of these characters. That even if you were playing like a tiefling, an elf, a gnome, or whatever it is, saying that your character traditionally did not like certain other racial groups was not going to be a thing in this world, because A, it was very distracting to the whole storyline to be able to convey that, and B, I just didn't want it. Like, we just didn't need to have that kind of mentality when role playing.
Well, there's a lot of considerations when you're dealing with a larger
world.
group like that, I would imagine. And having, like with a large scale LARP and all of that, you've got to scale yourself appropriately. I do want to talk more about all that. I'm sure we're going to get to the point of how a lot of that might be interacted with the stories that we are telling. I do want to move down real quickly. Thank you, Ryan, again for being here. We're really excited. I have tons of questions for you later. Haven, you are a virtual reality role player and content creator. Some people are very familiar with you. Some may not know who you are yet. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do? And
Gotcha.
Specifically the use of VR in this day and age and how it is amplifying roleplay.
It's really been taking off, especially considering the situation with Corona we find ourselves in, because so many people have been locked up inside and trying to isolate themselves. So a lot more people have been, of course, investing in virtual reality, finding ways to hang out with others online. And VR chat in specific also blew up extra because of that. And not only have we seen a lot of other content creators make their way over to VR, but just roleplay in general has really been catching on with a lot of people, and some big folks as well. I was more invested and more involved in just the online, socializing aspect of it way back in early 2018. I fell out of it. And then it was sometime last year, it was, I believe, August last year, I was asked by a friend who was involved in a role play to say, he came to me and said, so I'm in this show. It's being run by this guy, another large VR chat streamer, very, very talented, very fun man.
Feel free to drop any sort of tags or any sort of socials, yeah.
It's a role play known as Ascension Academy, run by a streamer known as Stealth RG. It's like a mix between Harry Potter, Ruby, and Dungeons and Dragons. It's kind of where it's at, and the setting is a military academy. And a friend of mine reached out to me and said, we're looking for a character type. It's an instructor that's supposed to be a military instructor at this academy. And so I was sitting here going, that's kind of up my alley. I enjoy that sort of stuff. Hell yeah, I'm in. I'll try this out. And for me, I was like, I'll try it out, see if I like it or not. Because I always did enjoy, putting on a character as a voice actor as well, acting, being able to create stories. I've always liked writing my own stories. But I was always good at coming up with a premise and not necessarily all the juice in between. But I got really invested in it myself because, especially in virtual reality, when you create a character and you're able to visually present yourself as however you want, because especially if you have the model making skills, you commission people. So I've had to teach myself how to do all that so I could, I don't have to blow loads of money on people making models and effects and avatars and things, which is definitely worthwhile doing because it really enhances the experience.
But it can be really expensive, right?
It can be. But it's one of those things I've spent a lot of time trying to learn it. But for myself, it's paid off because I've really been able to fall in love with what I've been able to create. I've always been about putting on a good show. I've always been about the aesthetic of things, which is why I adore presentation. I adore sound design because a lot of people fail to recognize how important sound design is to production.
So true.
If it's really good, you notice if it's not there, but you don't notice when it is one of those things. But it's really fun. It's really easy to get involved and get invested when you're playing a character. You kind of start to, I wouldn't exactly say forget, but it starts to feel natural, especially the more different you have your character from yourself. You're there in VR, you're seeing everything that's happening, you're talking to other people. And a lot of folks are kind of intimidated trying to get into it because it's more live action. You know, some people like the slow pace of text-based or other forms of online RP. And this is more, you know, Spitfire, you know, keeps going at it. But it's really easy to lose yourself in it and really feel out the character, get involved, and have a great time with it. There's so many times where we've been in RP and the episode was just, in regards to what happened in the show, was just god awful. Everyone was just like, oh my goodness, these people almost died. These people are upset. There's so much drama going on. And the moment you take the headset off, you're able to disconnect from that, hop in, start gushing, and go, whoa, that was great. And it's been a really good time. I'm really glad I joined. And it's definitely worth trying out if you haven't, or definitely worth watching some of the shows that do happen online.
What
they've
other
been blown up.
what other forms of roleplay have you done, Haven? Have you been involved in any kind of tabletop or LARP experience in the past?
I've done a couple of tabletop campaigns for Dungeons and Dragons. Unfortunately, especially with my busy schedule, it's been one of those that I was never able to continue for too long, or the campaign just fell apart. So I think the longest campaign I was a part of was maybe 3 to 4 months. It didn't last too long, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's a common story. I mean, tables like that,
Yeah.
especially when it was in person, was really pretty difficult to keep together.
Mhm.
Well, that's fascinating. Thank you. We're going to come back.
Mhm.
Fei, do you? I know you have a little bit to say about the early text-based RP world. Is there and LARP specifically? Do you want to start on a specific point?
Actually, I'm going to cover some things that the people haven't covered yet, which is forum roleplays, which is basically where you get a forum set up, you have a game, you pick a system, and you have a plot. And that can... It's a strange marriage between LARP and tabletop, if that makes sense. Since you're doing play-by-post, there's a solid system, there's dice rolling. Usually, you can get, depending on the size of your staff, handle about anywhere from 30 to 60 players, with making anywhere from 100 to 200 posts a day. And there's, what I like about it, specifically with that format, is that you can have a storyline. You can have specific mods that players can go through and actually affect the storyline. And there's a set time progression. So that was always really fascinating for me, and I think it might be something that people might want to look into again. It definitely does take a lot of planning and a lot of effort and a lot of time investment, because if you don't have a large staff, then you're basically playing all the NPCs.
Are you involved in one now?
I do not have the time right now to do forum RP, but for about a space of 10 years, I did play a lot in forum RPs, as well as running various games. And usually they occur, depending on how many days you're doing, in the space of 3 to 4 months.
So they have a set in time when you start
Yes.
a forum.
Yes.
Where would people go if they were interested in learning more? Would you recommend a specific site or a place for people to learn more?
There is no specific written guide, unfortunately.
So you're gonna write that guide then, right?
Maybe. Maybe on my next vacation day after I reorganize my study.
Your study looks beautiful. Start writing.
No, it's actually in the way of the door.
Oh, okay.
Outside. I actually shifted my study so that it doesn't look like a dorm room.
Okay. You didn't have to tell the internet. They didn't know. They couldn't see past your screen. But
That's
now they
okay.
know. Okay. Internet, it's the truth. It's a mess.
No, unfortunately, I do actually take pictures of my progress.
So there's not really a definitive source as to where you can learn more about this, but are there examples or games running that you know of?
There are examples. The one that I'm most familiar with is, of course, Legends of the Five Rings. And just to tell you how far back this was, it was still when they were being owned by Alderac, actually. So let's see. I would go to the internet, look up fallenash.com,
Okay.
and that was the site that I used to run to basically set up forums for people for free, because I was just kind of like, this sucks. I hate ads. I'm gonna buy a server. I'm gonna do a thing, and now I'm done. And I handed that off, and I do believe there is still someone running it since it's still up. There's also a list of the games that happened, so you guys can click through and then read all of the stuff that's available to public because of the wonderful thing called permissions. We also had private forums where groups could basically plan out what they were going to be doing, since Legends of the Five Rings is very faction based.
Mm-hmm.
We actually had interfaction political issues on top of fights with ghosts and the undead.
Well, I'm on board. You just said undead. We have more to talk about with that, but Naya, let's move up to you here. I don't even know where to start. Let's talk.
What you want? I took notes.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
That's who I am.
That is who you are. I know. You are an academic, and you have flourished in a world that has very quickly adapted to new forms of storytelling and incorporated old. And you've sort of been there for a big giant swath of it. So why don't you talk a little bit about where you see us going?
Oh wow, really though? That's what you gave me?
I mean, or if you have something to say based on some of the earlier forms of roleplay that you started with, I'm happy to have you start there.
So before I say anything, I will note two things. Yes, I'm an academic, but I feel like it's really important to make sure we understand that games academia needs to be accessible to people. So when you hear the words come out of my mouth, they're not going to be words that say things like mimetic and
please say mimetic though, just once or twice. I love it. Yeah,
mimetic.
It's one of my favorite
and
words.
ontological, like a lot of these things like have like really simple names, but academia has a language that purposely keeps people out.
Sure.
So my job really is to take that language and translate it into, like the rogue standard rogue set goes in, steals a bunch of stuff. Yeah, it's like that, but academia with me. So like I'm climbing an ivory tower, I'm gonna rob it, and then I'm gonna be like this.
Yeah,
like
good.
That's how I feel.
Vigilante academic, please.
Yeah, pretty much. That's all I want. Like, I would like to be your witch in the woods, scary librarian. So that's my life.
Wow, that imagery.
That's who I am as a human. And my day job is thinking about like also human computer interaction in games. So there's like a lot of interesting frameworks when it comes to people who are marginalized and like how the digital realm and like role playing actually works, as well as like the physical realm and like internalized bias, right? There's like a lot of things to say about that when you role play. So ask your question again so that I can actually answer it correctly now.
We just got an enormous number of gifted subs, and I want to thank Ravana. Thank you so much for those. That's very much appreciated.
Oh God, Rava's at it again.
Rava, yeah, it was very kind.
Rava's at it again.
All right, we can't thank you enough for the support. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
we love Gabby Rooster.
Yeah, for real.
Naya, you you started out with roleplay much like others on the internet, correct?
Yes. So Okay, let's go way back when. Way back when. I'm not actually. I am probably older than you think I am.
Not with a
And
Wayne's
younger.
World reference. They know exactly how old you are.
Do they though? Because I'm also younger than they think I am now.
You're an eldritch being. You don't have to tell them.
Eternal Enchantress. Chantrix, actually. Yes. So my first role playing was on paper, and I actually have some in here. But I was like 8, and we would write in like little books, and we would pass them back and forth, and like you would like write in the book what was happening, and like this is like the internet was available, but it was only for, but I did not grow up wealthy, and the internet, as well as like owning a dedicated computer, we were the family that got the AOL CDs, and like you just reuse those. Like they couldn't stop you. You never had to pay for a trial if you just kept reusing the free trial. So that was us. So when I finally got the internet, I moved into text-based role playing that I discovered on AOL chat rooms, and those were wild. They were wild, y'all. Are you a 12-year-old? Yes. Okay, well, you're in the same chat room as like someone who's 45 and in Wisconsin, and it's probably not good. But it wasn't
It's very awkward.
like you need to understand that there was no people use their real names, and in addition, people also like all you had to do is like click 18 to enter. You just check the box. That nobody was looking for you like that. So like there's a lot of sketchy stuff happening on the internet way in the days. So when I started, I'm sorry?
Can confirm.
Yeah, it's true. Like I'm very honest.
And also confirm.
Yep,
So,
same here. Confirm.
Yeah, I used to like you would walk into these chat rooms and it would be like, here's like a really standard response. It would be like, I walk into the chat room. I bow my head. I put my hoodie on. No one talks to me. Like that was like the standard entrance for like everyone, and it was really.
There's a bunch of virtual people not talking to each other.
Well, no, eventually like someone would like throw a drink, and like then there'd be fights in like the AOL tavern or whatever nonsense, right? So I started there, and I moved into Yahoo groups. Thank you, whoever decided to delete the entirety of Yahoo groups. I appreciate you.
It saves you a lot of embarrassment, right?
Woo! So grateful to whoever made that choice. Thank you for deleting many years of Anne Rice fanfic from me personally. I approve. But we would do so I did like play by email that way all throughout high school and into college. And so you know, being Black, one of the interesting things about role playing is that there's like the belief that role playing can only be for a certain subset of people.
Mm-hmm.
And it is reinforced both through popular culture, but also sometimes from your own communities, because like systemic isms are really difficult, right? So if you keep saying role playing is like, you see only white people in a book, or you see only, you know, people believe that these are the people who role play. So when you show up and you're like, hey guys, I was wondering if we could play some Dungeons and Dragons, what happens is you are said in like a really nasty way, well, you are attempting to be white. Why don't you want to be yourself? And like that is a very interesting thing that does happen, and that did happen. So I kind of like kept a lot of my role playing to myself and online, and like all the little lady of color nerds and like queer and trans nerds, because like as a side note, they existed and they exist now, would just like keep this to themselves and in groups. So like my journey was like secretly role playing until I went to college. I went to Williams College, and there's a group called the Williams Association of Role Players, and they were super nerdy, really weird. And like my first week there, someone was like, hey, I'm running, she was great. She was like, hey, I'm running this Exalted campaign. Do you want to play? And I actually, my first dice are in here. They took me to the role-playing shop and got me all the stuff set up, and it was really fun. And it was a really great group to be in and learn from. And eventually, like, the game I fell in love with was 7th Sea, which is fun because I ended up working heavily on the 2nd edition. Lead developer of a free, it's somewhere in that shelf.
Yeah, it's amazing, by
one
the
of
way.
them, yeah, along with Jerry Grayson and Jesse Heinig, who are also brilliant. Yeah, so like my role playing just went through there, and then there's like that. I will not bore everyone, but I will tell the first half of the story. I've known Nox for almost more than a decade.
It's more than a decade.
Yeah, it's more than a decade.
Let's not say how long, but just more than a decade.
We won't talk about it. It was more than a decade. And Nox, for quite some time, tried to get me to LARP. But the idea of going into the woods with what I was like, the way LARP is like sold to you is that it is like the worst, most nerdy thing you could possibly do. And I was always in theater. I was always writing. And I loved dressing up, and like I've been on stage and doing a whole bunch of stuff. It's great. But like Nox could not get me to LARP. That was not happening. Wasn't happening. It was never happening ever. And it always came down to, you are really trying to get me to go into the woods with a bunch of white people who may be drunk with weapons. That's not happening. I love you, my dear, my darling, but that's not happening. And I would like literally say that. And then Nox was like, no, I swear it's not like that. And I was like, okay, cool. But eventually I was like, all right.
I believe the words were, you need to be here.
Yes, that's true. That is true. You need to do this. You need to be here, Jonaya. Yes. Look, we set up a whole tavern. It's called the Scabby Rooster. For those of you who don't know, the Scabby Rooster is a literal place. It was an army tent that like people would like set up, and we'd like drag in, and like you'd be lifting it. Very, very Oklahoma, building a barn, but you know,
the best worst tavern in all the fantasy realms.
Pretty much. And I went, and I had an amazing time. I had a really good time. So Nox was very right. It was very nice, and I'm very lucky. I had run from LARP several times before.
If I could jump in just for a second, Naya, I want to touch on that, because you've already talked about the systemic racism that is around a lot of gaming, and specifically with LARPing as well. Can we kind of roll back just a second and talk about how others might have that perception about not just LARPing, but any of these forms in their own way, and how we as a community can combat it?
Yeah, that's like yes, and so
that's a whole TED Talk, I think.
Yeah, right.
I know it's a lot. You got this.
So one of the things we should actually just roll back to is that everyone is not born. No one's born with internalized bias. So internalized bias is like all of the little social things you grow up believing, and like you wouldn't even know that you were learning it. Babies start to learn it because of the way their parents hold them. Fun facts, I was also a child educator, and I'm a sociologist. So I'm just gonna throw that in there so you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
There's a really big thing when it comes to how you're taught to view other people and other things, right? There's something called the mythical norm. It's a term from Audre Lorde, who's an amazing Black intersectional feminist. You should definitely know who Audre Lorde is. You should definitely read those books. Fantastic. Good for everybody. So the mythical norm basically states that the world is kind of like only made for a certain subset of person, and almost no one fits this person, right? So the subset is like a young, white, Christian, heterosexual male with education and money who's thin and cisgendered, right? Like, but like, even if you are that person, in 30 years, you're no longer, 30, 40, 50 years, you've edged out of your youth, so you're no longer a part of that mythical norm anyway, right? So like everyone eventually falls right out of it. But because of this, we've been taught kind of like who gets to play and who doesn't, who gets to, like, is play leisure or is it something that's important to your life? So when we think about role playing, oftentimes if you are from a culture that's been told from a young age that you don't get to play, the idea of you actually playing a role playing game seems unfathomable. Like, the way that you play as a child and the way that you play as an adult, like, these are heavily connected. So there's a lot of systemic marginalization, which means like you're marginalized in systems, right? Like, it's not just socially, but like things actively keep you out. That happens a lot, and we kind of we don't, I wouldn't say allow, but sometimes we don't recognize that it's there. And you see this when you look at big RPG systems that have not had overhauls in 40 years. You see this in the way people approach games. You see this in the way that people even think about LARP, right? So LARP is so much older than people think. Like, there was Treasure Trap in, like, I think like the late 70s, early 80s, which was in Britain, and that was based off of, yeah, like I could just pull out like this weird LARP history rule book, but like there's a belief of who gets to play and who doesn't. And when you kind of reinforce that, this is what happens. I wish I had like a little sheet of paper. So first, if you know about role playing, and then you say to yourself, I'm going to write a role playing game. And so you write the role playing game, and then you play the role playing game. You get known for writing the role playing game, then people play your role playing game. And that's like a great cycle. But if the cycle is the only person who's playing the role playing game is this one type of person, and that one type of person is the only person allowed to write the role playing game, that one type of person is only allowed to play, you're not going to feel welcome. You're not going to feel safe. Also, I'm going to say something super shady. It's boring.
Yeah.
It's boring.
It's sloppy.
The shit is boring.
It's lazy.
It's boring.
I cannot, not to interrupt, but I cannot emphasize
Please,
how
jump
many
in.
times,
Let's
how
just
many
open
times
this up.
I have looked at systems and settings and gone, oh, bless your souls, you know nothing?
I just want to, like, it's so, like, everyone in this chat is so much more exciting than 90% of, like, role-playing games you will find just, like, hidden in the dustbin of your local comic book shop that was, like, produced in 1984.
Right. There's been an evolution, right?
Here.
Like, we've watched this growth of this. Okay, Faye, then where are we lacking in growth?
So,
no, it's a
so
conversation.
riffing on what Jenaya said, and we've seen.
I'm sorry, Jonaya, long A, forget me.
Jenaya, my apologies.
Yeah,
Riffing on what Jenaya said, even with the recent move to basically make role-playing games more diverse, it's hard to say that that's actually what you're doing when you don't have people from those cultures doing it. And I cannot emphasize how much of a pushback you get as a person of color or as a woman when you go, oh, hey, this thing that you base in a real life culture, it's wrong. It's actually a stereotype. And people go, nah, I know because I had this one experience. And you're just like, oh.
Yeah, it's something that happens now. Like, I write a lot for TTRPGs, but it also happens in LARPs. And let me tell you,
100%.
sometimes I consider it worse sometimes in LARPs because you're embodying these people. So
Yes.
like you get this character sheet, and like some LARPs you write your own characters, some LARPs you get a character sheet written for you, some are a hybrid. There's all sorts of different ways to make a LARP all over the globe. But sometimes you'll get a character and you'll read the character and you're like,
Oh.
oh,
I know what you think.
you don't know
Oh.
how bad this is.
And then people show up dressed like them, like, oh no.
Oh no! And then you show up and you're like,
Literal
oh,
costume.
don't do that.
All right. So then, what do you
People are trying.
say? What do you say to creators and LARP organizers about how to best prepare themselves for a world that incorporates a wide variety of understanding of the world around them, so that we're including everybody, we're inclusive, we're open? What do you say to them to best prepare themselves to put forth that game or that group? Maybe it's a forum. What do people do? What's step one?
Do you mind if I answer?
Go for it.
Anybody, this is open. Yeah.
Ryan and I had actually a brief conversation about this on Facebook on one of his posts, and my biggest advice to any creator and any game runner is be open to the idea that these cultures you've created change. And be open to the idea that the events that you're running, this plot line, these world-shattering events that you're running in these plot lines will change how a people and a culture react to it. It will change your stereotypes. It will change how they interact with each other and with other cultures. And that's one of actually the big problems that I've noticed in game creation, is that people are very married to the idea of, I've created this monolithic culture that is homogenous across this large geographic area. And you go and look at things and you're like, no, like cultural norms and how people think about things and how people deal with things change just down the block. And that's my biggest recommendation. Be open to the idea that there is diversity in your world and things change.
It's not like Star Trek where every planet has one culture.
Or two, but they're in conflict.
Or two, yeah. And they're at war.
Yes.
It's not like that.
Or, in conflict with the other planet in the system.
Or if people have the same background, that those people will think exactly alike because they have that same background. That has never been the case in anybody's role play or actual life experience.
Haven, I want to jump in just really quickly. The VR world, you put on a virtual skin. How does that affect things in your perspective? And have you, what is your take on all of this based on the VR interactions and role play that you've undergone?
Especially personally, it's something I haven't really run into very often. It seems to be very open. People don't really look at that or cling to that, especially considering the VR chat world tends to be very LGBT plus friendly. And because everyone has these avatars that they're using, and there's a lot of people who stick solely to, the RP. And what really helps is when you're able to differentiate RP between real life. Some people suffer from RP bleed. It's really refreshing when you have those who don't, because you're able to have these conflicts, you're able to have these really interesting story and plot lines go on between characters, and then once you take the headset off, you pull away from that, you completely disconnect, and you just start gushing about it, and it's a whole lot of fun. I personally haven't really run into or seen many of those issues. For the most part, it's just people having a good time with the characters that they create, and I personally like to focus very solely on creating interesting characters, telling a really interesting story, and improvising, RPing out a really, really fun scenario and show for people. So, yeah, it's not something that I'm too well versed on because I don't see it very often there, and it's actually refreshing because you get to focus a lot on the just having fun,
Right.
I wish I could do that.
So there are.
Is it VR?
Oh no, it's not VR. It's just systemic. I mean, you only see necessarily what's going to affect you sometimes. So that's like, it is what it is. But from a human-computer interaction point, and human-computer interaction, Haven, you probably know this, is how computer systems interface and how they're made and how they work with the world. Human-computer interaction is infamously accidentally racist, sexist, and homophobic, which makes all of our programs racist, sexist, and homophobic. So sometimes there's like a very digital issue when it comes to who gets what, who sees what. And you'll see that in a lot of apps written into the code. Not because people want to be malicious, right? There's not necessarily someone on the other end going, oh, now I will make all your things bad. No. It's just like the algorithms are made by humans, and like the algorithms that you see are like repeated and like what's made, right? So like who gets access to what? Like what's the price point for VR headset? Who has the access to the price point for VR headset? Like what is like what's happening? Who has the skills to make the VR headset? Right? Like these are all tiny, really sad, nitty gritty details.
Who has
that
access to the education
Yep.
to make it work?
Yeah.
Sociology.
It's something we don't think about, but like actually really like it really influences communities and the way they play. But it's good that you've had like really positive experiences, because that allows you to like spread your wings and do good things. Like I'm really excited for you to try things. Like I want to run a LARP for you. Like how can we make you? Yeah, let's like.
So let's talk a little bit about running LARPs. I do want to come back to some of this soon as well. But I think that when it comes to either running a role-playing game or a forum or whatever the medium might be, or organizing a TikTok group, there's a lot of that goes into it behind the scenes. All of you have had some sort of effort that has been put into a specific product that you were trying to share with others. What would you say to anyone who wanted to find one of these new forms of digital creation? How would you encourage them to step forward? What are the first steps, given whatever your specific specialty might be? Az, do you want to start?
Sorry, did you say to find them?
To find or create.
Oh, well, I mean, those are two very different things.
Sure.
I have yet to see like a digital form that's specifically created for roleplay. People tend to take whatever digital forms they get and then like adapt them to roleplay. So it can often be pretty coincidental when you find a community. So that's interesting. It'd be cool to see somebody gather like a list of places where that has happened. Actually, I'd be interested to see that. But as far as creating them, that's also greatly influenced by the format that you're using. Like for instance, on TikTok, we had to create a sort of rule set that was consent based, but the fact that the duet feature means that if somebody makes a video, if they make an interaction, you don't have to duet it. You can ignore it, and there is no way for you to be like forced to participate in a situation where you don't know what's happening. At least not like in the moment. There are issues with people making kind of strange videos and then directly tagging other people, which is a little pressury. But because of the inherent like way that TikTok works, you will not be like forced into a room essentially with a situation that you did not consent to. So the rules are taking that into account. So it's really about figuring out what the pros and cons of your chosen platform are, and figuring out what the needs are and adapting to those.
Sam, same question. What would you say to a creator or somebody looking to play? How would you start? Where would you go? What advice do you have?
Okay, first of all, absolutely make sure that you have a team. No man is an island, and all that junk. And I promise you, no matter how great your ideas are, no matter if you are the best logisticer in the entire world, and this is how you make your bread and butter, you are not enough. You must have some other people, ideally people who have wildly different experiences than yourself. I've seen it even in just like smaller collaborative projects. Like, get yourself some goddamn mods. Get yourself some people who are going to be online at different times than you. Get yourself some people who understand the rules. And like, you don't have to answer questions immediately. You can just say, "Hey, we haven't had a chance to talk to everyone yet. So, and like, to clarify this rule or whatever, give us 48 hours or give us however much time and we'll get back to you." Like, present a united front as much as possible, but also don't dig in your heels about, like, if someone brings something to your attention in any way, but especially in a way of like, "Hey, this makes me uncomfortable," or "Hey, I've noticed that people are starting to get hurt because of this," or "Hey, I didn't like this because it hurt me," or "because of this reason," or whatever it happens to be. Do not dig in your heels. That is the quickest way to run people out of your game. That is the quickest way to run anyone who doesn't fall into that mythical 8 things that Jenaya mentioned earlier, out of your LARP. That is the quickest way to kill yourself in any creative endeavor.
Excellent. Ryan,
anyway, I have a lot of feelings on this.
No, that's why we're all here. Ryan Omega, same question. What do you think?
I think a couple things. Who is your intended audience? Because if you are making a forum or a platform where you're going to be, I guess, showing the audience like the results of your role play. So like if you're a live streaming or like an actual play type of show, that's going to be a different consideration than from, say, an in-group of like 3 or 4 people that you're going to be role playing with, because like with 3 or 4 people, you can even among yourselves be able to regulate how that role play interacts. But if you're displaying for public, because the point is to entertain or broadcast these things, you have to keep in mind that your audience is, you have to figure out like how you're going to interact with that audience, if you are going to at all, or if you're going to just put it out there like a broadcast. And keep in mind that anything that you put out there to the world, you won't be able to control their opinions. You won't be able to control what they may get offended over. And you have to be willing to understand that that is kind of part and parcel of being like a public performer sometimes. But at the same time, if you at least listen to those audiences who are not directly involved in your role play, it at least gives them a chance and opportunity to still feel part of your world, even if you are just performing for them. And just keep that in mind.
Excellent. All right, Haven, same question. What would you recommend to people that are seeking a way to engage, and if they were going to create their own content, how would they go about it?
Fortunately, VR chat is easy with the little bit of knowledge in regards to creating assets. It's very easy to create something that a lot of other people can get involved in and invested in. Anywhere from reaching out to other communities, because there are platforms in VR chat established already to be like a stepping stone for people who are looking to get involved in VR. I'm with a knit group of friends who are more active, larger role players in the community, and they actually host a lobby every week that's supposed to be a stepping stone for that. So they act as like the NPCs who are running a casino or something, like a hotel, and everyone can kind of come in and present their character. And from there, they can meet other people and get involved in RPs, make friends, become part of communities. In regards to hosting, creating, and having your own RP, completely doable. There are so many fantastic artists and asset creators. A lot of people I know who make models, effects, maps, and some from scratch as well, because you can find a lot of models on both DeviantArt and many other websites where you can create all this stuff inside Unity. And once you have that world created, you have the character created, you just hop into VR and you have a good time. Like there's another roleplay that's actually currently in development, which is really, really exciting. A lot of people are looking forward to it. It's a cyberpunk like roleplay that's based off of Shadowrun, called Callous Row. That's run by a man named Arcade.
Yeah.
He's a bigger upcoming presence in the D&D world. Very good at what he does. And there's a lot of people who are super excited for it. A lot of people who are on board, and they're making already, and they're in the process of from scratch making several maps. People are making their characters, getting it approved, and it's going to be a really big, awesome show. Same goes for all the other RPs. The Ascension Academy roleplay I'm a part of. We have custom-made maps, avatars, and effects. I have another one that I'm doing on my end that takes place aboard a battleship. And basically, if you can make it, you can do it. And it's a whole lot of fun to, a lot of people, type things out. A lot of people, you do what you can in real life to role play a scenario or draw a scene, but to actually be there in person and be a part of it all going on is really awesome, especially if you put the love, effort, and time into making it very presentable and flashy. It's completely awesome. Like even in the show that we do, because of course there is combat inside of it because it's supposed to be a military academy in a D&D like world. So when we get the chance to invest really cool effects, really cool scenes for these fights that go down, it can be really, really, it can be pretty awesome. Pretty damn cool to be a part of.
Fabian and I have been involved for a while now. It's been about a year, but we don't have the time to get as involved as we want. We've jumped in and out. But the one thing that I realized about VR that maybe other people don't realize who aren't part of that community is that you don't have to have a VR headset to interact with VR chat. You can play it as you would World of Warcraft or something along those lines.
There's people who do it through. There's a lot of people who do it through desktop as well, and there's definitely people who are open to that. There are some shows, especially. Well, there's a lot of people who are paying for just having fun, and everyone's obviously doing it to have fun. But of course, you also have some of the content creators who are putting on indeed a show, like Stealth RG, Arcadem. Some of these bigger names who are fantastic people, great at what they do, and what they've been creating has been awesome. And it's very fun to watch. But for presentation purposes, of course, sometimes they require you to have the VR headset, and it can, there can be a little bit of gatekeeping involved, but that's just a part of creating the show process,
right?
Which is understandable, but that doesn't mean that you can't be a part of desktop related RPs all at the same time.
It's an interesting world. There's a lot to it, and I'm still figuring it all out. And we're again really thankful that you're here and appreciative for your perspective.
Yeah, it's really worth if people can investing in, especially since, as I mentioned before, you do have a lot of people because of the whole social distancing thing who are getting involved in VR and using that as a platform to kind of close that distance of being so separate from people. And it's also been a great place for people who have social anxieties and such to step outside their shell a little bit, and, make friends and have a good time. And then once you learn how to make your own stuff and you get some really cool stuff working for you, it's a really fun time.
Great. Faye,
can I add to that a little?
Oh, yeah, by all means. No. This is a conversation. I just wanted to make sure that everybody got a moment. But please jump in.
I just want to. One of the biggest things that I've learned creating my own environment for people to interact with is that role-playing inherently makes people vulnerable. Almost no matter what kind of role-play you're doing. I trust that there are probably exceptions, but none that I have ever seen in reality. Like even the most basic role-playing games make you vulnerable people. It's used as a type of therapy, and it has been for, I think since the 30s.
I get
so there's something about that you have to account for, right? It's a bit of a different animal, and in that way, like, it does allow people to sort of use it as a type of therapy sometimes, even when they're not realizing it. And because of that, you really have to pay attention to the themes of your environment and your game. And even if they are light themes, you kind of have to anticipate where people might take them a little bit, because people will, if this is like a big emotional outlet for them, they will take it to a place where they can get some sort of emotional catharsis a lot of the time. They're just on their own.
Yeah.
And that can lead to some pretty intense experiences just about no matter what kind of game you're playing, no matter how
Yeah.
light
would-
it is. So
yeah.
there's a huge importance for me, emotional safety, learning that language, having some sort of base knowledge of boundaries and emotional safety is probably the most important thing that I could recommend to somebody who wants to design these environments.
For VR, I would say it definitely comes down to, of course, communicating and, knowing who you're role playing with and what they're comfortable with versus what you're comfortable with, discussing things and ideas out of character versus in character. There's some people who are pure RP enthusiasts who they don't discuss anything, they don't create scenes, whatever it is, and they're just like, all right, the role play is going to happen, we're going to improv this, whatever happens, happens. Some of them are incredibly talented at it. And there's some people like myself who, especially if we're putting on a show, which is half of what it is sometimes for the people watching, will discuss things with other people, discuss plots, scenes that can happen, but never really like the nitty gritty details of it. Just like, here's the overall arc of what we'd like to happen. And then when we hop in RP, see if we can work our characters there. Once we get there, we're like, yeah, we got it. So a lot of that boils down to, again, communication, letting other people know what you're comfortable with versus what you're comfortable with. And in regards to, I understand how it can definitely be, you can feel vulnerable, especially in an environment where it's not text-based, you're not crawling along in an RP, it's all very, on the spot, on the fly. But it's something that's very easy, because I've also spoken with other friends who have, like severe anxiety, some other issues, and it would be hard for them to get involved in the RP. But once they're there and like they're in it for a couple of minutes, I would definitely say that being in the VR environment and seeing everyone doing the same thing you are definitely helps, but it's easy to get lost in it and grow comfortable real quickly. But yeah, it's it's very nice. But I will say as well that I guess some of what you're discussing also does boil down to RP bleed, because there are some people who, the emotions can kind of carry over, which is something that generally speaking, most of us do our best to avoid. There's this phrase everyone says all the time, which is RP by the way, RP by the way. Like, say for example, I mean, I was even looking in chat, there's some fantastic they're like content creators, streamers, and people who are involved in roleplay on VR chat, and we'll have like scenes that happen between our characters where they're just at each other's throats, it's dramatic, it's terrible, and the moment we take that headset off, we're like, this was great, oh my goodness, like we're excited about it.
That's so great for people who can do that. That's not always the norm, and that's sort of a mark of a new role-playing community too, where people are not quite as familiar with bleed in the ways that it can be good and like incredible actually and therapeutic. So it's not something to necessarily avoid, but it's definitely something to manage and learn the language for managing it. I feel like Jonaya has a lot to say, and I can't wait.
I know. And here's the thing: we have a whole topic on safety, and we're gonna get right to it. Fei, real quickly. No. I know we're gonna talk about this. You're gonna have all that time to do that. Fei, real quickly, the same question as before. What would you recommend to content creators and players as to how they can best get involved?
Find a platform. Just pick one. Doesn't have to be do it on Discord, do it on Tumblr, do it on TikTok. Find a platform and get your friends on it. You had a question earlier for me about how to do forum gamings. Language. Okay, reboot.
I'm tongue-tied today too. Don't worry about it.
Look, I speak English for a living. I'm terrible.
Yeah,
fine,
coffee.
Just give me a sec. That said, to what I talked about earlier, specifically with forum role-playing games, you just need a website and your choice of bulletin boards. We have a lot of actually free software out there like PHP, BBB, and it's actually not that complicated if you know a little bit about permissions, and that's basically like information that hopefully you use on your social medias, friends, permissions. Please filter your stuff.
Yes.
You should be able to set up a forum really easily, and after that, it's just the logistics of figuring out what sort of game you want to run. Usually, I recommend that if you are going to be doing this for, say, more than a month, for all of you to get together and for your players to actually work together to create their characters, because you don't want to have that one character who's just sitting out there under the tree all the time, alone, thinking deep dark thoughts.
Solitary role
Alone.
playing.
Because great for monologues, but not great
Yeah.
for role playing.
I don't know. I've had some of my best role playing experiences on my own. It's weird, just as far as like going off in the woods in character and being like, "This is what's happening right now, and I'm dealing with it."
I agree. At that point, write a book.
Yeah, I know. I know it's an interactive thing, but I enjoyed it for
Sorry,
the
not
moment,
sorry.
Faye. Yeah, don't be. Okay.
Wonderful to have
I
those
feel like
moments,
that,
but if
man.
that's the entirety
No.
of your experience, write a book.
You know me,
Yeah.
Faye. You know me, Faye. I get people
I
involved.
do.
I mean, there's also that difference just between like I have a rich internal landscape that I am also playing in at the time of this role play or whatever else is happening. Like I have this internal monologue explaining to myself why this character is making these decisions, and then enacting that on the world as part of your role play.
Yeah.
And also the difference between I'm a lone wolf, no one talks to me, but really I want everyone else to be making those overtures to me so I can continue playing a lone wolf.
Right.
Riffing on what Sam says, as a player, unless there goes my earbud. As a player, rather than as a game runner, I would recommend when you are making your characters, give them goals. Give them reasons to interact with other people, even if you are that one lone wolf character who wants to go off and save the world by themselves. Give them a reason to interact with other people.
Right. If it's hidden, they can't find it, you know? You have to give
Exactly.
them some sort of breadcrumb trail or something, right?
Or give yourself a breadcrumb trail. Don't put yourself in a corner in terms of role playing.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, thank you. Naya, it's the same question, but I'm going to immediately come back to you because then we're going to start the circle again about safety. So, what do you recommend to content creators and players first?
So let's just start with that. So here's my genuine, for real, complete, honest belief. Role playing is a necessary and radical act of liberation. That means you don't need. Am I allowed to curse? I think
yes.
so. Great. You don't fucking need shit. You don't need it. You don't need it. You don't need dice. You don't need paper. You don't need it. You don't need costumes. You don't need that shit to be expensive. You don't need like random bits of like bobs or like
I wish I could switch to full screen for this.
There's
Don't
like
tear up your whole house.
I'm just like pulling things out of the ether. But like when I say it, I really mean it. Like the first role playing you ever did was when you were a child and you would get together, and like some of you may not remember this because like we easily forget it, and like we draw the line between childhood and adulthood and like what does play mean. When you were a kid, all you needed was a fucking box and some time, right? Like maybe you were outside, maybe you lived in a rural area, so you had like a forest, or maybe you lived in the city and you were just in your bedroom and you were thinking, right? Like, or maybe you were in preschool and you were running around playing Ninja Turtles, or like, I'm trying to think of anything past 1998. Anyway, but like She-Ra. I also played She-Ra, so that's something. But these it's super important to know that you don't need anything. A lot of people say, well, I'm not gonna LARP until I save up all my money because that's what I need to do. You don't need to do that. You don't need it. I am gonna save up all my money to buy all these fancy dice and books. You don't need that shit. You don't. It's great if you have it and if you have access and you can do it. But literally, I teach, I volunteer teaching children and teens in various ways to like how to role play and like how to write games. And I teach game design. And one of the things I love telling teenagers is like, I'm like, all right, we're gonna play a role playing game. And they're like ready because the first thing they're thinking is D&D, right? Because D&D has a huge monopoly and it is a monopoly.
Sure.
We believe that like this is what tabletop role playing is, right? Because that's how we've seen it in movies and shows, et cetera, et cetera. So they think that you need the D&D book and like a whole bunch of dice. Like we need to have this much dice and like all these little miniatures. I don't even have miniatures near me, but you need all that before you play. And they're like, so where are the miniatures? And like, where's the game? And like, where? I'm like,
It's in your head, kids.
Literally, that's what it is. I hold up a blank sheet of paper and I say, we're going to make characters. And then we're going to tell a story in a circle. And then we're going to add some mechanics. And like we build and we talk about safety. We talk about like how, like, and when I say safety, I think like that's like the worst term for what you're actually doing, but it is what it is. We talk about how to interact with each other and like how to like actually let themselves be free, because you would be surprised at the number of people who say things like, well, gee whiz, I could never make a game. Yeah, you can. You made one all the time when you were 4. Like, what's the difference? You're like 22 now. You have so much more experience. Like these are things that like we need to kind of internalize. So when you, and like it's really important to know that humans throughout our history, throughout human history, role playing has existed. You know where they were role playing? They were role playing with Queen Elizabeth in the 1500s. They were like literally Queen Elizabeth had an entire role playing. It was wild. You can Google this. It was seriously wild. The Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians role played. Like there's all sorts of like really like people used in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. There's like all of this really rich history of people getting together and playing pretend, and like that's the basis for everything. Do you know where you can find role playing? You can find role playing in Red Dead Redemption. People literally role play in Red Dead Redemption over like voice chat, and they role play in Grand Theft Auto, and they'll role play. People role play all over in all sorts of mediums. If the medium exists, you know somebody role played in it, because
100%.
like that's how we like humans connect and learn about themselves in these moments of play. And I just really want to emphasize, especially for anyone who watches this, like I love it when you buy materials. I love it when you support all of these content creators and like you think about like all the hard work they did, because it is hard work. But please believe in your own imagination and ability to create the world that you want, because like it exists and you can do it, but so many people believe that they can't, like that they're not special enough to do it. Don't wait to LARP. Don't wait to do text role play. Don't, if you want to try it, I guarantee you there's a space for you, but do not discount yourself. Discount yourself when it comes to actually just making something. There are many different ways to make a game. And like there's no one right way to LARP. There's no one right way to play a role-playing game. There's no one right way to do any of that. So when we talk about like what's going on in our own like spheres in our worlds, it's just so important to just hammer that home. My biggest advice for someone who would like to start role-playing is to be brave enough to invite yourself to the table. Be brave enough. You can do that. You can just say, hey, I've never tried this before, but what if we just like played a game, right? And like it's really scary, but you can do it. And you can build that community and you can talk to each other, and there's like lots of resources and tools depending on what type of thing you want. But the main instance is play. So play.
I think that's beautiful. Be brave enough to invite yourself to the table.
Yeah, I mean, that is a real big thing, though. How many of you, like, let's be real. How many of you have ever been fucking terrified to role play? Like, I'm just gonna be dead honest. Do you know how Nox remembers what my face looked like when I was at my first LARP? I was like, these people are talking to me. What are they doing?
Your face
like,
was
why
like
are you
that for
looking-"
2 minutes though, but it was like
Okay,
that for
that's
2
fair.
minutes. But
That's fair.
because
I
then,
have
then
a
it was
mission
fish
to
in
life.
water, and I couldn't keep sight of you. So fair
Well,
enough.
I was told I could hit people with foam swords. I don't know.
You were in for it. So
But
second
it is-
part of that then. Oh, sorry, Ryan, go ahead.
Even in traditional Gen Con, which has been that I've been to for many years, or at least no, a couple of years, but many other like gaming role plays. If you go into a lot of those rooms, there's lots of people who have these demos and they want you to play. There are several tables where they want you to learn their games so that they get to show off their games, but at the same time, they want anybody at their table. You don't have to have a certain background or only certain people are allowed to play. They want you to play.
And like, can I just really quickly build on that and give you some like concrete things? Within the US, there is Intercon. Intercon is a very long running con in which people write completely different LARP scenarios every year and they may never play them again. I was in like a Janelle Monáe LARP that was really fun. I know, right? It was great. But like,
that's a thing,
right? Fantastic. These are things that people write and then they just run them for their friends in like this small convention setting. People are doing it on college campuses where they just like they just say, fuck it, I'm gonna do it. But there's also Festival. Festival is a Danish LARP. Well, not it's like LARP and tabletop. It's like a very interesting way to role play. It's a festival, but they accept and teach you how to make their style of role-playing games. And they love newcomers and they don't care if you've never been there before. You've got that, and then you've got places in England like the Smoke. The Smoke allows you to just like submit little fun LARPs that you never made, and like so many people who are first-time writers come and do that. You have the DexCon and like the double exposure cons that like will also help you like create and run things and let you test stuff. Like there's a lot of places, but you may not know where to look because we don't talk about them often. But you have the power to just write a game and release it and play it with and as a side note, you don't have to monetize it at all.
No.
If you just want to like play with your friends around a table, that's good too. So there are a lot of places you can do this.
There's also a lot of online resources, and a lot of those one-shot games get submitted online. So if you want to play, and for free, and it's amazing.
For free!
I love them.
No way!
And they come with like pre-written characters. All you gotta do is be like, hey guys, let's play a game. Everything's already written. It takes like it'll take us like 30 minutes to look at these rules because I've never looked at them in my life before. I don't even know what we're playing.
Right.
And we'll play a game for 4 hours and then we can be done. We can talk about it after and we can play another one. Whatever you want to do.
In the same breath, I would say find those creators and support them. If they have Patreons, if they have other ways to do it, artists need to eat. Artists need to eat.
Absolutely.
And
support
so often,
them where you are able.
Okay.
But a lot of them put out free content as well to interact with.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We have 20 minutes left. I do want to start the safety talk, which I know could take 3 hours. So let's... we could. I know safety is not the best term for it, but it is the most accepted, widely understood term. I'm starting with you, Naya, and then let's go around the circle. How do you promote and encourage safety in the environment that you're working within?
I feel like, how do I answer that question? I think it depends on what you think about safety. Because every game is different. And I'm just going to be really upfront with that. Sure. It depends on who you're playing and how you're playing and what's going on. So my specialty is actually in bleed, as well as what happens when you role play and like the emotions that come up, and like what happens to people. for me, talking about safety before you play anything, one of the things you should talk about is like some really basic things. What's the tone of this game? Right? That way you don't have someone who thinks they're playing a comedy game when in reality, we're going to be doused in blood for the next 5 days and walking through the woods, right? Like, you don't want someone to show up to the game like, oh, yikes.
Yeah, I wasn't
I
aware.
thought we were going to play something different, right? Like, and that's your fault as a game master.
Sure.
It's sometimes a lot less their fault because of the way we don't communicate well. It can go.
Larps have walked in on.
Oh, there's some things.
Oh,
As
I have
say-
definitely invited people into a LARP thinking that they were showing up as NPCs when in reality they were people that just showed up to camp and asked what was happening.
Oh, you thought they were NPCs and you just assumed that they
Oh
had...
yeah.
Oh, wow.
They turned out to directed them to plot camp. They ended up being NPCs anyway. But
I mean,
that's how you bring them in.
Yeah, that's one way to hook them. As same question as what would you say about?
Oh, was Jenaya finished? I'm sorry.
I wasn't.
Oh, okay.
But I'll be really quick.
Yeah.
So the point when it comes, thank you, S. So one of the things when it comes to safety is like talking about tone and talking about like what you expect from your players, but also understanding what your game it starts from the beginning. What's your game about? Practically, how are things going to work? Because safety doesn't just encapsulate the things that we think are like the hard things, right? Like racism, sexism, and homophobia, right? Like safety also is, have your players eaten? Have you thought about like what, if your players have mental health issues that they need to talk about? Do they have physical access issues that they need to talk about, right? And like how you design a game and like how you play that game really is like all of that encompasses safety too, which is why it's a big thing. But one thing that I feel is consistently overlooked is the aftermath of games. People really, especially if you're a new role player, you're like, haha, this is great. And then all of a sudden you just sit there and you're like, oh my goodness. Right? And it's not necessarily bad either, right? Like the thing is like, we've been conditioned to believe that like bleed is terrible, but it's not. Bleed can be terrible. Yes, it can. But it can also be really transformative. So like thinking about how your players are feeling after is incredibly important. And having room, we call it aftercare, definitely not borrowed from any other scenes, but we call it aftercare.
Those
and
who
the
know
truth
already know. We know that look.
Anyway, what had happened was the point is that you have to take care of people, and sometimes you may have like a letdown, or like the rush of the game isn't over, or you identify with that character, and it's just important to think about what happens to your players after, not just within the space of the gameplay.
Thank you. And again, I'm sorry to try to push us through quickly. I just want to make sure
No,
everybody
please
gets
do. You can tell me to stop talking. It's okay.
No. I don't want you to stop talking. That's the thing. But I want to make sure that everybody gets a little moment. Same question as before. Is Ryan back there? Are they lurking in the background? Is that what's going on?
I don't know. Maybe.
Oh, okay. Tell them I love them. As you are up, same question.
Great. I'll try to make it fairly.
I mean,
quick.
say what you want to say, but we obviously, I want to make sure we all get to it.
Well, I think as far as safety is concerned, obviously every community is different. Like for instance, in Nordic countries, I've noticed they tend to go a little bit harder with like heavy topics, like right off the bat, without really necessarily feeling like they have to explain. And that can be quite jarring for someone like not a part of that culture. It can seem quite dark and a little bit like, oh, what's going on? So every culture is different, but I think I'll start with out of character stuff. I think it's important to realize that harassment isn't necessarily about things that are always recognizable to you. It's about crossing somebody else's boundaries and boundaries are different for every person. So if you set a boundary like, hey, I need some space, maybe don't talk to me, and then that person keeps pushing that boundary and tries to talk to that person, even if they're not being sexist, racist, something that seems quite obvious, that is still a problem behavior, and you still want to address that, because that is almost never isolated. That type of behavior that can almost always evolve into bigger, deeper harassments that will harm a community eventually, especially if you ignore them. You can't ignore that stuff. It will not go away. It will just blow up in your face later, and then you'll have like a dumpster fire to deal with in the community like every 6 months. I've seen it happen a lot. So
it's actually happened quite a bit in the LARP community, hasn't it? Like,
yes,
a lot of communities have imploded because there was a couple of reoccurring issues that were never dealt with, and then it all comes out at once, and the whole thing collapses around it.
Yeah, and a large part of it not being dealt with was because the organizers, the people who were dealing with it, were not equipped to deal with it. They could not recognize that harassment and manipulation when they saw it, and it was outside of their scope, and they did not get resources or people who knew better in their circle, and it just went neglected to a point that became dangerous. So I think everyone should try to familiarize themselves with basic language of manipulation and grooming and things like that. But barring that, at least try to get people around you who do, and recognize that harassment is about boundaries, which are individual.
Excellent.
And as far as in-character stuff, character bleed. I know Jonaya is the bleed queen. Actually, a lot of what I know,
all be experts. We're all experts of ourselves.
I've learned so much from you, though. It's like, oh, bless you. But what I know of bleed is that, I mean, saying this as a person who's been like a little traumatized by bleed, I love character bleed. I think that it's always really exciting when a community begins to discover the power of character bleed, which is why I'm really excited for what Haven is working with in VR, because VR has the potential to be an incredibly accessible form of LARP and roleplay. And once that community discovers the power of bleed, it's like once you figure out the language surrounding bleed and sort of a little bit just more knowledge about it, you can kind of steer it, and you can kind of control it in a way, and you can choose what to take away. So you can actively work on your own issues. Like I know that so much of my anxiety has been alleviated from character bleed, from LARPing, as characters who had to either process it or having to pretend that I did not have anxiety. So once you discover that, it can be an incredible tool, and it also better equips you to deal with the fallout from bleed that is bad.
Excellent.
Some of it sucks.
It's
Infinity alteration.
Let's go over here to Kendrick real quick too, because we are about to hit our mark. If people want to stay after, that's fine, but if people do need to go, they're welcome to do so, and we can continue the chat now if people are interested in doing that. But I promised that 11 o'clock was going to be our out time, but that doesn't have to be the end of the stream. For those of you that do need to go, there's absolutely no problem. You can step away. But I do want to go to Haven real quickly. Speaking about the VR space, you were talking a little bit about the safety and how things work in there, because you have the rooms that are specifically steered towards groups that have already kind of worked out what their consents are and how all that comes together. What would you add to that for VR and how it ties into roleplay?
It's an easy disconnect, because especially since a lot of people, they tend to focus on purely what they're seeing, which is the character that's being presented at the moment. It's much easier to disconnect yourself from IRL and not focus on who the person is, who's playing the character. So it's really easy to get involved in that. And again, it's all about communication. That's literally all it is. Because I've had people come to me and be like, "Hey, I've kind of got this idea going on, or I want to do this with your character. Is that something you're comfortable with?" And I've been like, "I'm enjoying it. Everyone's enjoying it. Like, just keep going with it. It's a lot of fun. It's been a good show." But it's that's pretty much literally all it is. It's all about communication, talking to people, understanding who's comfortable with what. The different elements in RP that you're okay with, and if something happens that you're not okay with, you just reach out and be like, hey, this kind of makes me uncomfortable. And then the person's like, all right, cool, I'll pump the brakes. Because again, hashtag RP, by the way, you know,
Right.
this is all in character stuff.
Do
so
you do that in Discord, or do you do that while in VR? I mean, how does that work?
Sometimes people will, it'll be a mix. Sometimes, oftentimes, a lot of times in Discord, either prior to or after an event that had happened, or sometimes we'll do what we like to call, you know, just card down. Like if we're walking up, like we'll have to do it sometimes if something happens so funny, we just like we can't help but laugh our asses off. One of the funniest things that happen when we're doing an RP show sometimes is for people to break character because they're just laughing and run off. Like I'm supposed to be this hard, serious, you know, badass, but whatever they just said destroyed me. I have to walk away or say, guys, RP card down. What the hell? You know, it's so people can do that sometimes too. Walk up, be like, card down. This, you know, mention, you know, a couple of things OOC if it's they have to communicate something going on, or if they have to like, how's about we plan this, or hey, this is getting a little bit, you know, let's pump the brakes a little bit. So people are, there's a kind of with the people who have been involved in the VR chat RP for a while, and those who get involved, there's kind of this language that you start to understand when it comes to that. So people generally understand the whole, hey, card down, yada yada. We talk about, okay, cool, card back up, continue scene, you know, that sort of stuff. They've been very overall, they've been very good with it. It's obviously every now and then you do find the occasional bad apple. Just because, you know, people are people and they do what they do, and some people are seriously affected by RP bleed, which can get sometimes, but that's why, like I said, it's all about talking, all about communication, and especially once you're able to spend time role-playing with people, you find those friend groups, you find the people that you love who are able to create those characters, who can have, in character, very spicy, juicy, dramatic stuff going on. However, when you pull away from that, you just look back at it and you be like, this is such a good scene. The fact that they're, you know, having such a bad time with each other is actually, from a show perspective, from a story perspective, a great scene. So I've been very blessed to find people who are very good at doing that. And it's one of those matter of time things where you get to know who's capable of that and who isn't. And it's more common than not, people are good with it. So yeah, I've been having a great time with it.
Great. Yeah, we appreciate it. So we are getting close to time. I still want to go around. If anybody does have to leave because of prior commitments, it's absolutely fine. You can drop from the call. Everything will be okay. It won't mess up our view. But I do want to keep going here. Sam, same question about safety.
Like so much of it has already been covered, and I agree wholeheartedly with all of that. Harassment being a pushing of boundaries, as well as bleed is absolutely useful for good and for bad. And a lot of it is straight up just communication. You gotta be able to communicate, hey, I'm not comfortable with this, because if you don't communicate that, then no one can really know. I mean, there's a certain amount of communication that happens, of course, via body language, which is less accessible now online and presumably in VR to a certain degree. Body language might be harder to read. I don't know. I've never played a VR game. So I guess it would depend on that. But like a lot of it is making sure that you're using the same words as other people. Make sure that your definitions are the same, because the second I use a word that means something different between me and between you, is where a lot of that communication breaks down. So it is never a bad time to say, hey, wait a second, just to make sure that we're on the same page, what do you mean by whatever this word is? Because when I say it, I mean this, or it has this connotation to me. And a lot of that sounds like I'm putting a lot of personal responsibility on people, or which in a way that I definitely am, but this isn't to say that if you are a victim of harassment that it is your fault, ever. It is always the person who does the harassing who is at fault. but it is good to be on the same page as people to make sure that they know your boundaries exist. And this boundary is a soft boundary for people I know very well and trust to be able to cross. Strangers are not allowed past this point, but my friends are, the people I trust to be careful with things past this soft boundary. But a little bit further past that is a hard boundary. Not even my friends are able to cross this, or whatever that happens to be. Or only my very best, most trusted people, there's maybe 2 in the world or whatever, can cross this boundary because they know how delicately they need to treat anything past that boundary. Or whatever that happens to be. And it is different for everyone. And it is a matter of learning, okay, so this person I can talk to about this subject, but I must be very kind about it because it is a subject that they have issue with for whatever reason. But this other person, I can talk with subject A that I need to be kind about for this person very bluntly. They don't need me to be particularly kind about it, so we can have slightly franker discussions about it or get more nuance in a way that won't cause them anxiety or cause them harm in any way. But they have another thing that we need to tread carefully on, and there's no shame in that at all whatsoever. Everyone is different. There's no way to be the badass that has absolutely no squicks, no triggers, no issues with anything whatsoever, because at that point you haven't lived a human life. Everyone has the experiences that shape the way that their world works, and even if you don't necessarily know what those issues are, being in a system that allows you to say in the middle of something, hey, actually, I just realized that I have an issue with this, so I need to step back, or I need this to not continue in this direction until I figure myself out and how I'm going to react to this. Always allowing those things and that knowledge to change is necessary.
Thank you,
and
Sam.
I went off on a wild tangent.
No. It's okay. I'm glad to have had it. It's good to hear the perspective. I'm gonna go over here to Ryan. Ryan, same question. What do you have to say?
So if you are a performer on live stream, your performance might be complicated by the fact that you might end up looking at chat while you're performing and someone doesn't like your character. And that could potentially affect you. And what's been interesting from what I've seen in a lot of live stream performers is that many of them are not used to the language of Bleed that a lot of LARPers are used to. So sometimes a performer in a live stream show will like talk to me and go, "Oh my God, so my character felt this, and then she felt horrible, and yet like after the show was done, I still felt horrible." It's like, is that normal? And I said, yes, that is called Bleed, and it's a lot of live streamers don't have this language, and I think it's also very important that if you have the privilege of being able to perform any public platform, that doesn't mean that you must be more subject to a lot of those negative feelings because you're on a platform and therefore must deal with it. You must, if you are a content creator of a public platform like a live stream show, make sure you do talk to your performers. Even with Dungeons and Dragons live, when a person was about to be killed off or eliminated, I made sure I gave them a phone call to just check in with them, because being killed off in front of thousands of people watching is kind of traumatic to people. Even if you're paid to do so, your emotional state of being eliminated in front of everybody, you may start thinking of things like, oh my God, all of these people don't like me. Oh my God, all of these people don't like my character, and you may or may not be able to separate that. It's always important for a public performer to be able to have an outlet to talk to someone and say, I feel okay or I don't feel okay. Just at least have something accessible to talk to, because just because you're on a public performing stage doesn't mean your emotions get locked away because you're doing this all for your character on stage. Many performers, whether they are live streamers or not, sometimes put their hearts on the stage, making them especially vulnerable to deliver those performances. And just make sure that they have someone to talk to, and especially with LARPers who are performing or putting themselves out there for more hours than, say, actual play, where you're doing it for 2 or 3 hours.
Ryan, you still with us? I think we lost that last little bit.
Oof.
Oh.
I was going to say, when it comes to bleed, one thing that actually genuinely helps, I've learned and noticed, is there's some people who like to create self-inserts when it comes to characters to roleplay, which I understand why. But usually when you're creating a character, I've noticed that more often than not, when you make the character so much different from yourself, different opinions, ideals, the way they act, carry themselves, species, whatever it is, the bigger difference there is between your character and yourself, the easier it is to not let the emotions transfer over. And that does come entirely with what you're also comfortable with. And as you mentioned before, there's some people who, like actors as well, there's a certain amount of vulnerability people have, and there's also what people are comfortable with when it comes to letting themselves feel. Because especially like if you're trying to create a good scene or you're trying to put on a performance, much like a content creator as I do, you definitely want to try to tap into that. As a voice actor or someone with an acting background with those kinds of chops, I do have a high tolerance level when it comes to stress or whatever it is. So say for an example, there's an RPM joining that's supposed to be like an alternate universe World War II. And the character I'm creating is a lieutenant, and his name I decided to name him after my father. And the reason I did that is I want him to be a character who's experienced loss and has felt loss and has made him a more empathetic person because of that. My father passed away about almost 2 years ago. So whenever someone in character calls out his name, I think of him, of course, and I kind of feel that slight pain. I feel that slight loss, and it helps me create the performance, create the character. But I've determined that's something that I'm personally comfortable with, and taking on for the sake of the performance. So it's a lot of what you deem you are okay with and comfortable with, because everyone, of course, has their own tolerance levels.
Well,
Can
sorry
I
for your
just-
loss, but that's great to hear. Go now. What do you got?
Sorry.
No,
You're
no,
gonna
no.
please forgive me because
Sorry.
no. Haven, everything you're saying is really important. And I really want to let you know a few things because I've also lost my dad, and this is also something I've done with RP and role playing. And one of the things we focus on a lot is separating ourselves from the character, right? Like that's a big thing. People are like, if you don't separate yourself from the character, everything's going to be bad. But that's not necessarily true. So one of the things there's something called emancipatory bleed. This is a term I created and is a part of my academic work. Emancipatory bleed is specific. It's usually the way that it's usually formed is talking about systemic marginalization, right? Like people who in their everyday lives are told that they can't do a thing, but then you play a game and you may try and do that thing, and then you internalize the fact that you can do that thing, or you can be that person, or you can have those skills, right? Because you've been told your whole life that you can't. Suddenly you do it, and then like that character bleeds into your real life. That also can be used for loss, right? I would play. I played characters that are very, we call it close to home. And it's playing a character that's very close to yourself. That's really not necessarily a bad thing. It's how you go about it and how you work with other people. And I've explored grief, and I've explored family death, and I've explored systemic racism and sexism and homophobia while role playing. And it's very difficult and requires extra safety. But like what you're doing is really important. There's a feeling, there's a lot you can learn about yourself when you role play, and it is difficult, and I do not advocate it lightly, but I just wanted to tell you that what you did there is really great, and like it can be hard to have those moments, and it can be hard to think about, but wow, like that's I just want to give you 80 bajillion high fives
Thank you.
for that. Like it is really important to talk about, because sometimes we get caught up in the nastiness of believing that bleed is like me being angry with you, right? When sometimes it's you being closer to someone in a very good way.
Right.
So I just
Well,
that's
and
great.
there could be positive bleed and negative bleed. It does kind of run a gamut,
yeah.
and there's a definitional difference here, I think, in some of these terms. But yeah,
Yeah, I see
certainly.
bleed as true neutral. If
Yeah.
we're gonna pull out yield alignment chart,
which everybody loves, by the way.
always chaotic, but like I think bleed is true neutral. If you're
Yeah.
just new to it, you can feel the negative emotions, but sometimes we don't see the positive emotions that can come out of it as well. A lot of people, I hate saying this, but it's true. Here's a role-playing secret, something that many books have been written about. Here's the secret: every character is you. You don't like that secret because some of you played some motherfuckers, and so it's like, no, this isn't me, right? Like you never want to believe that. You're like, oh, right?
That's the mood.
I like, oh, because it makes me feel like, yikes, don't look at me here. But the truth is, like, role playing is embodied, so it's in yourself. It's not coming from like random column D. There's a lot of theater work that comes out of talking about how you use yourself to be put in a character. So like there's a little bit of you inside every character you play, even when they're a terrible person. But like that's how your bleed kind of goes wishy-washy. And sometimes you can use it for great things. So
well, yeah, it's similar in the sense that, because obviously you're definitely going to be in your character a little bit, also in the sense that it's hard to role play up. Like, say for example, you can only do in RP what you are capable of as a person. And say for example, if you're trying to role play a particular skill set, you know, if say for example you're to role play like I'm supposed to a drill sergeant, but you don't have the chops for being able to yell loud, you know, maybe toss out the insults and really play the role or have a particular skill or knowledge set, then it's not as convincing. Like if you have to role play as a medic, you don't have the medical knowledge or the lingo and the know-how, it doesn't come across as convincing. So obviously you're only capable of doing a role play what you as a person out of character are capable of as well. So that definitely speaks to what you were talking about as well, how you are in your character.
But then you learn to do those things.
You can.
Like,
yeah, a lot of people will go out of their way to learn
set.
about it.
I have
Google
learned
that
so many
bullshit.
weird and sometimes uncomfortable skills from LARP, just from what I needed to know from LARP. Like I know a lot about poison and calligraphy, so
hand in
Trust me,
hand.
Google it.
Like,
It's on YouTube. There's some sort of YouTube tutorial that will show you the basics.
There are like 4 people with the same search history, and half of them are writers and LARPers.
Right.
Or both.
Bleed is though, it's the. I mean, I call it interpersonal bleed. I don't know if there's like a real word for it, but that's what I call it. And that's like the relationship bleed. Like when you decide that your character is best friends with someone else, and then you come out of that experience as friends. That's my favorite. The magic of friendship is the best magic, and I've made so many lifelong friends just from that, because we decided for a weekend that our characters were going to be buds.
So many of my friends I married in a LARP somewhere or role playing.
That also sounds about right.
Oh yeah, just marry them up
like that.
I have a lot to say, but I think we all do. And I think what we've proven is that this panel could go on for 6 hours. However, I do want to end with Fei, because I don't want to leave anybody out here. Fei, you can either talk about the safety thing, or if you don't feel like you have anything to add to that, just give us another little nugget of truth from your world.
Well, I do actually have something to add to that, and that's actually more from a practical standpoint, because everyone's gone over bleed and safety and emotional well-being very well. And I think one of the hard truths that we haven't actually said in so many words is when you go into a LARP or any role-playing situation, know what you're getting into. Ask them, what the fuck's gonna go on here, y'all? Because that is a boundary that you're setting. It's for your own personal safety. Because if it's going to be something dark and awful and horribly triggering, maybe pass. For your own well-being, don't go like, I'm gonna do it because it's gonna be fun. No, take care of yourself. Know your boundaries.
Take care of yourself, please God, because no one else will know how to.
And also figure out a way that you can get out of a situation, whether in role-playing or in LARPs. Figure out a phrase, figure out a buddy that you can go to and go like, hey, pies are great, which might translate as, I'm really having a shit time. Can you please take me somewhere where I can just sit with myself and not interact? That's from a player perspective. From an organizer's perspective, have something set up for players and inform them. And every time, no matter how many times or how many times you run for a set group, remind them at the beginning, hey, if you have issue with something, because frankly, we're human, we cannot keep track of every little detail about each other. That's impossible. And for all we know, there might be times that something that wasn't a trigger and something that people were okay with previously is not okay right now because of something that happened in your life. That happens. So setting up a way for your players to go, I'm out. Nope.
All right.
End scene. Bye.
To check though, this is our signal on this stream
Yes.
that you're
I
out on
understand.
something, so you're not triggering that right now,
No,
are
no,
you?
no, no, no. I'm actually showing them an example that we set up beforehand of this is not okay. I don't want to go there. I'm having feelings.
And I'm just checking right now to make sure that that signal was not a real signal. All right.
And that's always good as an organizer to do. Go, okay, so is this a hard no? Is this a I need to sit out for a few minutes and I can get back to it? And again, that's communication. But having those preset in your head, so when you're in the thick of things, when you're feeling the feelings,
that's amazing.
You can reach for that is great.
I wish that I had 3 more hours with all 9 hours. I will have to do this again. We'll work it out. There's so much more to be said about all these topics. There are questions that we didn't get to. If you haven't already, please jump into the Scabby Rooster Discord, and I'm going to make sure that these questions get answered, and I'm going to post them in there. So everything that you've asked in chat, if those questions have not yet been answered, I promise you we're going to do our due diligence and make sure that we do so. I will reach out to each of these panelists and get their responses, and we'll make sure that those are in a document that you can enjoy and read. I want to thank absolutely everybody. Yeah, Sam?
I was just also going to say, because we did mention online roleplay areas, the Scabby Rooster Discord does have an area for that, for Aether House Academy. I am one of your mods for that.
That's true.
If you would like to enroll in Aether House Academy and play around with other people and do homework in your free time.
Yeah, that's what we do is we roleplay homework. Yeah. No,
it's fun homework though.
It is fun. They're puzzles. If you like puzzles, you find it there. But that actually leads me to this point. I'm going to go around the circle right now. Please tell people who you are and where they can find you on the internet. If you have anything that you want to shout out, a project or a specific place to go, or a LARP to check out, or a roleplay experience that you're working on, or if you just want to say, who you are and what you do, then that's fine as well. I'm going to start over here with Az. Tell us where everybody can find you.
Well, for now, you can find me on TikTok, at least until it maybe gets banned one day or not, whatever. But I'm pretty much everywhere as Azrai or the Azrai. I am on YouTube as well. I've taken a small break just purely because I've gone through a bit of a gender discovery and I gave myself a little privacy. But I am coming back soon, finalizing the script for that resurgence, and there I will be talking a lot about immersive experience design and covering specific events and communities. So if you do want to learn more about this stuff, you can find me talking about it there. And then on TikTok, I'm actually doing the collaborative storytelling that you could participate in if you would like.
Yeah, I can't understate this enough. Az is an amazing creator. Please follow them. Keep track of what they're doing. They are brilliant, and they have a lot of really wonderful things to say. You'll find a very welcoming community wherever they go. Sam?
Thank you. So don't look at me.
Sam, where can people find you?
I can be found pretty much anywhere as a D20 owlbear. A lot of the stuff I do is for, I guess a word would be preordained fandom. I write a lot, do a lot of content creation for fandom specific stuff under D20 owlbear. A lot of it is not safe for work, so just be aware of that.
Content warning.
Content warning right there. But you can also find me at the Scabby Rooster more often than not. I'm pretty much on Discord all the time because I honestly have nothing better to do.
We love you. Please follow those socials and keep track of it all. Ryan Omega, where can everybody find you?
You could find me I'm Ryan Omega. You could find me on Twitter under Ryan OMGA, on Facebook and Instagram under Ryan Omega. You could find me occasionally on the Scabby Rooster or on my own Twitch channel called Life Action Roleplay. And you could also find previous podcasts on Life Action Roleplay, a LARP podcast, wherever podcasts are found.
Yeah, I highly recommend you follow Ryan. Check out Life Action Roleplay especially. Has covered a lot of very interesting topics. If you've heard some of this or want to see the perspective from the LARP side, he and his co-hosts, who are all lovely, have brought together some really interesting guests who have a wide variety of opinions on all of this. You can learn more directly from them. Please follow them. Check them out. Twitch, podcast, all of that. Haven, where can people find you if they want to get involved?
Right. I'm primarily on Twitch, is where I do most of my work. You can find that. I mean, it's been active in chat, and a lot of, I actually see a lot of folks from my community as well.
Greatly appreciated.
A lot of fantastic people.
Yeah.
You can find myself at Haven_Kendrick. Stream rather often, and the RP show that I do happens 3 times a week during the night. And if you go through clips, you can find a lot of stuff there if you guys want to get an idea of what VR chat roleplay can like, all the saucy moments, the serious moments, the downright hilarious moments. And there are also, like I see in chat, like I could name several of them. There's a lot of people here who are involved with the VR chat roleplay stuff, and they also stream their perspectives, so they're worth checking out. And if you go by my channel on Twitch, there is a link to my Discord, the Starship Actium, in the description. If you join that, Discord community is very active, especially when it comes to roleplay discussion and shit posting. So,
well, if you're in chat right now and you are part of Haven's community, don't be shy. You can put links in there to whatever else you might be working on. If there are ways that people can connect in this world, that's certainly one of the reasons that we brought this whole panel together. So please share those links.
Yeah. Quite specifically, there's a couple of them were actually part of the same show as well. There's Fulcona, Kelly Siren, Lauren, who someone else was in here a while ago. They're all figures in the VR chat world. And Arcadum dropped by as well. I mentioned him before. He's the very, very, very big upcoming and fantastic DM for Dungeons & Dragons. He's been streaming that a lot, and he's been doing great at it. And he's also the author and the creator, the one who's heading that Callous Row roleplay I was telling you about that's been building from the ground up. So he's definitely worth checking out as well, if he's still hanging out in chat. But I would advise you check out all these people, watch what they do, because it's content. It's great.
And, you know, as I said before, Fabian and I have kind of stepped into this world. We found some really welcoming and amazing people. We have a lot of questions still. We're exploring it. But definitely check out Haven's content. Be sure to jump into that Discord. And, you know, again, I can't wait to talk more about this in the future. Fei, where can people find you?
I am, I think, a cryptid. So
The woods.
nominally, you can find me on
Find Fei
Instagram.
in the woods. Thank you.
Yes, and sometimes on Scabby Rooster.
Also the
but
woods.
Nominally, you can try and keep track of me on Instagram under Feythreads, FEYTHREADS. Yeah, that's probably the best place. to find me. If you have any questions, feel free to poke me. I do check DMs occasionally, and I will generally answer them unless it is either salacious or shitty. I don't answer shitty comments.
Fei, you've done so much for our community. We're very thankful for your presence, and we always appreciate you.
Yeah, I'm just that cryptid lurking in the background.
No,
Larps.
some cryptids need to be exposed and shared with the world. I'm sorry.
No, thank you.
Naya,
Move.
you are the last, but you are certainly not the least. Tell us a little bit about where people can find you.
Okay, I'm Jonaya Kemper. You can find me on Twitter at Violet Riot Games. You can also see my work in the recently released Honey and Hot Wax compendium, as well as the second edition of #Feminism, and the micro RPG book, which is coming out from Simon and Schuster, as well as Kids on Bikes. Storytelling
were
with
you
this
part
one is
of
Silver
the-
Innie,
Did
as
you guys
well
just won an
as
Innie?
This
Yeah.
Goths vs. Volgoths.
Yeah.
I write a lot of tabletop supplements
Yeah.
in addition to LARPing. And I am really remiss because I should be doing things on the Scabby Rooster. I will shame myself. Yes, those are the places to find me. Mostly on Twitter. I do not answer DMs. I don't look at them. I don't have them. But I will also say that I'm really grateful to Nox for hosting this panel and being so wonderful with us, and also really striving to make sure that role playing across many different mediums is respected and open to all, and just really making sure that that door is open. And I'm really grateful to all of these panelists I got to learn from today. And like, I have so many questions for you, and I just am really appreciative for being able to learn from you today. Thank you so much, everyone.
And
Thank
again,
you.
that Discord is going to be open, so be sure to jump in there. We'll try to get all those questions answered. This is absolutely it. This is the end of Gen Con for us, but this has been, I'm going to say, one of my favorite Gen Con discussions that I've ever had, and I've had quite a few of those. All of you are amazing in this panel and outside of it. I really respect each and every one of you and look forward to our next conversation. I'm excited. Whatever the future holds, no matter how dark the world gets, I respect the light that each and every one of you carry, because through roleplay and through interactions with the communities that you shepherd, you're making the world a better place. And some people just see it as play, but I see it as making a difference. So thank you for everything that you do. And thank you, chat. We will see you on the flip next time. We're out of here. Check out the Scabby Rooster. Drop a follow if you like what you saw here. We serve cold stew and warm ale every day of the week, every day of the year. We're always here for you, and you're always one of us. Have an absolutely wonderful day, and we'll see you soon.